One of the other questions I get asked all the time is, could you talk to me about execution? Getting things done, making things happen. I say lack of execution is a symptom. You don't deal directly with lack of execution. Lack of execution comes from here and here, from your reds and your yellows. You never have an execution problem with your greens. So instead of trying to say, how do we get more execution, say, how do we get an all-green team? Now, let me alert you to something. You will never have a World Cup level team unless it's all greens. Let me tell you why. Let's say you've got 3 or 4 of the people that you rated green talking, and a red walks in. What happens? The whole conversation goes like this. Let's say you're having a meeting, and you've got mostly greens but 1 red in the room. The conversation keeps hitting a ceiling. It's like it won't go to where it could because there's a red in the room. Let me encourage you to set a personal date with yourself to have an all-green team. You may say by your birthday, by the end of the year, by next year at this time. I don't know how fast your organization works. Maybe 3 years from now, by your 40th birthday or your 50th birthday or by something. It may take you a few years, depending on how entrenched the system is that you're working with. But at what point will you have an appointment with yourself to have an all-green team? I'd encourage you to set that. Okay, let's come back, and we're going to try to get through this, through the doctor process as quickly as we can. And again, here, you want your organizational structure, and you want your leadership star to release someone that you don't want, and we've had questions. Okay, let's look at cash for just a minute. I am not a fundraiser. That's not my business. I've been a part of raising money. I've been a part of watching capital campaigns. I've been a part of reorganizing how we raise money, etc. Let me just talk to you a little bit about raising money. I want to explain to you a concept called the rocket. As you look at all of the programs you've got, there are certain programs, if this is a moon rocket, there are certain programs you've got that are easy to raise money for compared to others. There are certain programs that are very difficult to raise money for. Let's say you have 5 programs you're doing. One of them may be very easy to raise money for, and the other 4 are very difficult to get people involved with, raise money for, etc. Instead of trying to treat them all equally, if I were in your place, I would try to focus on raising money with the easy one. The one that's the rocket that could go into orbit, it could go into world orbit. It's that strong. And then find a way to tie the other programs you've got that are harder to raise money for, tie that to your rocket some way. Now, a couple of other concepts, and then I'll open it up for questions. I asked Ted Engstrom one time, what is the key to fundraising? Because he had raised millions and millions of dollars. He said, the key to fundraising, the key to all fundraising is your list. The list of people that are supportive of you, the people you have on your mailing list. Let me show you how it goes. Let's say, for example, you have one person on your mailing list or on your list of donors, your list of friends. You have one person. And that person makes, let's call it $5,000 a year. How much money can you raise this year? Not much. Now let's say you have 100 people, some of which make 30, some of which make 100,000, some of which maybe one or two make 200,000. You got 100 people on your list that you're regularly communicating what you're doing, how you're doing it, what the results you're seeing, etc. Now how much money could you maybe raise? Quite a bit more. By the way, let me give you a phrase that is very important to me. I've suggested to many people, nothing motivates like results. Nothing motivates donors like results. When they give you money, they want to see results from that money. They don't want to just not know whatever happened. I gave you $100. Whatever happened to that money? I don't know. Did it make any difference? I don't know. They want to know what results you saw. But back to the list story. Now let's say you've got a list of 10,000 people on your internet that you're regularly, or on your website, your internet, that you're regularly sending out stories, things that are going right, things that are going well. 10,000 people, some of which could give you $1 million, some of which could give you $5, but you got 10,000 people on your list. Now let's say you've got 1 million people on your list. And one of the advantages, a tremendous advantage of internet, is it doesn't cost you much more to have 1 million people on your list and send 1 million than it does to 100. And the old way, when you had to put a stamp and an envelope and a letter and all that kind of stuff, if you had 1 million people, it cost you a lot of money to communicate with them. Today, it doesn't cost that much. But let's say you've got 1 million people that know who you are, what you're doing. You see the difference? I'm saying what you want to do starting today, if you haven't been focused on it, is start creating your list. Start refining your list. Start growing your list. Because like Ted Engstrom said, your list is what gives you the capacity to raise money. Another conversation I had was with Paul Eshelman, the person that built the Jesus film over the years. We were having breakfast, and he said to me, "Bob, you know how we decide what we're going to do in our monthly appeal letter? What we're going to feature in our monthly appeal letter?" I said, "How?" He said, "What's going on in the headlines?" He said, we got stuff going on around the world, and if there's a tsunami in Japan, we talk about what we're doing in Japan. If there's something happening in Rwanda, we talk about what we're doing in Rwanda. If it's happening in Bulgaria, if all the news is on Bulgaria, we talk about what's happening in Bulgaria. Now, you may not have a worldwide ministry, but you have a ministry with 5 or 6 different services in it. Ask yourself this month when we talk to our internet list, which of these 5 services is most consistent with what's happening in the news in our country right now? And feature that. Because people want to help what they see. If they see on television, this happened, they want to think, well, how could I help with that? But if they're not even aware of it or have never heard of it, and you say, oh, this is an urgent need, the chances of giving much money or any money to something they've never heard of is far less than something they've been seeing on television for the last 3 days. So I'm just saying, keep that in mind. I thought that was a great concept of raising money. And then, like I said, I would encourage you to double whatever percentage of money you're putting out of your budget into the internet this year. Because I believe that as an author, I concluded several years ago that I could see in my lifetime where the sale of books was going to go down and the sale of digital books were going to go up. And I thought, I think sometime before I die, I will see actually more digital books sold than hard copy books sold. Happened 2 years ago. I thought sometime in the next 30 years it'll happen. It happened 2 years ago. I'm saying the internet is just getting started, really. It is such a phenomenal communications device. And so I would encourage you, I think the same thing is going to happen to fundraising. I think that what used to be a monthly letter, that I think we'll have monthly letters for several years yet, but what used to be a monthly letter in the mail asking for money, raising money, is going to be an internet in the mail. Because in the States right now, a lot of groups and political groups and like tsunami groups and stuff like that are raising millions via the internet. And so I'm saying, have your team, I would encourage each of you to do this. Ask your team, who do you know that is a internet genius? And it may be someone's younger brother or younger sister, that they really understand the internet at a level that you as an adult really don't understand at a certain level. But they've lived on it, like 24 hours a day for what? I'm just saying, find an internet genius that can help you develop your program, maybe for very little money. Maybe they're going to college and need some money and will give you 5 hours a week to help you develop your internet or your website. But I'm saying, really protect that. Even the local church, that the website needs to be strong, in my opinion. Okay, any questions on cash? We don't have a lot of time for fundraising. Like I say, that's not my area of expertise. We've already talked this week about vital signs and standards. We've already talked about a variety of things to do with money. These were just some extra things I thought would be helpful. Any quick questions on money, on cash? Okay, let's move on to tracking. Because I'd like to leave as much possible time at the end to have for open question and answer on anything we've covered. The next is tracking. Once you've got a clear direction, the right team, and enough money, from a human perspective, that's 85% of building a strong organization. But like I say, if you've got all three of those in place in your master plan, but you don't have a tracking follow-up with your staff, it's going to sit on the shelf and collect dust. But there are a couple things to do with tracking that are fascinating. There are 6 words that are all you really need to track, in my mind. When it comes to tracking or reporting, there are 6 words or 6 concepts that you need to keep track of with your staff. And the reality is that whether you ask these questions on the phone from someone who is 50 miles from you, or whether you get it in a written report or get it in a verbal report face-to-face, they're the same questions to track whatever someone on your staff is doing. These are the questions you need to answer for your board. on a regular basis. Not everyone needs to report on the same schedule. That's important to see. A new person who joins your staff, I would ask these same 6 questions probably every day for a week. At the end of the day, I'd ask them these same questions every day for a week. But then I'd ask them maybe once a week for a couple weeks, same 6 questions. Then I'd ask them maybe once a month or once a week or however often you have staff meetings. But someone who has been on the staff for a long time doing the same thing may report once a month. Maybe answer these questions once a month. Or someone who has been there for a long time may be answering questions once a month, but when you have a conference, as the conference grows close, they may start answering them once a week, and then the week before the conference, you may ask these same 6 questions once a day, and then after the conference, you may ask them, you may let them go back to once a month. So in other words, not everyone answers these questions on the same frequency. But a lot of people say, well, let's have a staff meeting and we'll answer these questions once a week or twice every 2 weeks or something like that. But what are the questions you need to ask your staff? Because there are only really 6. And what I would say also is that 3 of them are best dealt with in a group. In other words, you deal with 3 things in a group in your staff meeting. But 3 of them are best dealt with 1-to-1, or maybe 1-to-3. Let me explain. The things you talk about in the group are, what plans are you making? In other words, between now and the last time we got together, what plans are you making that you haven't told me or told the team about? Because let's say you're planning to go to New York City to a conference and maybe someone else is planning to go to the same conference. Well, let's ride together, let's go together. So that the team knows what everybody's planning. So that you report to the group, what your plans are. The next one is, what progress have you made? Because you want the team to be able to celebrate with you. Hey, we finally raised the $50,000 we were supposed to raise. Oh, great, well done. We saw, 53 people come to Christ in last night's rally. Well, great, praise the Lord. So that you can celebrate with people when they make progress. The group can. And then the last is, how can we be praying for you? What would be your prayer requests of our group? Those are the things you discuss in a staff meeting. Let me tell you what might surprise you, but I would encourage you never discuss in a staff meeting. Problems. Now, you need to know what your staff, what problems they're experiencing, but don't discuss them in a staff meeting. They may say, we're having problems with a computer, and they want to talk about it right there and get it solved right there. The problem is, you may be having a problem with your computer, but it doesn't apply to anyone else here. So we talk for an hour, you're getting exactly what you need from this staff meeting, and they're sitting here bored. So if someone brings up a problem that only applies to them, you say, okay, could we talk about that after, let's meet right after the staff meeting, and we can talk about it. As a matter of fact, it applies to not only you, it applies to 2 other people. Folks, this is my wife, Cheryl, and she knows that I enjoy tea. Thank you. I like tea often, regular, lots of it, black and lots of caffeine. So, but I may say that problem not only applies to you, but it actually affects you and you, but not the two of you. So right after the staff meeting, could the 2 or 3 of us meet? And you may meet for an hour, and it may be very productive 2 or 3 hours, but it doesn't bore the 2 people that it doesn't apply to.
But it's only when it's individual problem, not like the entire ministry problem.
Yes, yes. When it's a problem that applies to only 1 or 2 or 3 people in the room, always ask it to be a subsequent after meeting. Yeah. The other one is a decision. Can I do this? Can I hire the person? Can I fire the person? Can I buy this? Can I sell this? Can I do this? And they may need a decision today or right away. And if I sit and talk to you about the decision, it may be very helpful to you, but it may be boring and useless information to the rest of the people. So again, if you ask me for a decision in a staff meeting applying to only 1 or 2 people, I would say, could we talk about that after the meeting? And as a matter of fact, then you think quickly, does it apply to anyone else in the meeting? And if it does, say, oh, also could the two of you meet? Because I think it applies to you too. Okay? And then the last thing is, how are you doing personally? And here, I say on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is one of the best days of my life and 1 is suicidal. Okay? Now let me explain what I mean by that. There are a lot of people that do not know how to put into words how they're feeling. They may be feeling very discouraged and not know exactly how to tell you. They may be feeling very high, very excited, very positive. But they may, whenever you ask them, they may say, oh, things are fine. But things are fine one day may be a mask, meaning I'm very discouraged, very depressed, but I don't want everybody in the group to see it. So, oh, I'm fine. But you as the leader need to know when your staff member is very discouraged. And so you ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is very excited, very positive, and 1 is suicidal, how are you doing? And what you're going to find is that sometimes, over a year's time, a person will give you 9, 10, 9, 9, 8, 10, 3. See what that says to you? Then I need to get together with this person right away personally. Now, I mentioned to you, you can have this same report over the phone. Let's say you've got a staff member 50 miles away. They can email you this report. On what you want is so that the report comes to you on 1 piece of paper. 1 side of 1 piece of paper. You don't want a 4-page, 5-page report once a week or once a month. You want 1 piece of paper that, like, what are your plans? I'm planning to go to New York to the conference. I'm planning to do this, progress, this, this, this. You can pray for me about that. I've got this problem, need these 2 decisions. Personally, I'm doing an 8. That's the report. You want it so that they don't take 5 hours to prepare the report, which when they should be doing other things, and you have to take 5 hours to read the report when you should be doing other things. You want it very quickly there. But when you call them on the phone, let's say they're working on a major project, and you call them and you say, hey, how are things going? Number 1, do you have any plans we haven't talked about? What kind of progress have you made? How can I be praying for you? Any problems? Any decisions you need from me? How are you doing personally? Okay, thanks, and hang up. In other words, you can ask these on the phone in an informal way, or you can have them email them to you if they're operating at a distance, or you can simply have them turn them in every Monday morning or whenever you have your staff meetings. But remember, these are the ones that are discussed in a group. And what you're going to find is if you'll keep this distinction right here and do these in a group and these on side meetings, your staff meetings don't take 4 or 5 hours. They take about an hour maybe. Now, one little quick suggestion. I have a friend who has all of his staff meetings standing up. They have a table like this. They stand around. Their staff meeting are all standing up. If you give people really soft, easy, nice chairs with coffee and donuts and like that, they'll sit there all day and talk to you. But if you're standing up, you think, is this meeting ever going to get over? You know? And so they like the short staff meetings when they're standing up. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that, but I just thought you might want to hear that as a suggestion. The question is, do you come back to plans? When do you come back to plans? If they say, we've got a plan to do this and this and this, if anyone has a question, if anyone says, hey, let me go over there, let me ride down there with you, whatever. Or if the person says, well, I'd like to know the full plan, or could you get me a copy of the full plan? Or next board meeting, could you give us a 10-minute briefing on the plan? You can do anything you want with it, but you're basically sort of keeping up on the bullet point level. Yes?
Is it not the part of the evaluation rather than
is what a part of the evaluation?
coming back to the results of the previous?
Oh yeah, the results of the plan. The results of the plan would come more under evaluation probably. It would actually come under progress. In other words, we were planning to go to the conference in New York. Here's a progress report. We went to the Congress in New York, and I brought you back each a book called this or that from Bobb Biehl's seminar, or there's a tape you can watch that I think would be helpful to you, or something like that. That'd be progress. My real point here, yes, the question is, in a scripture or in a Christian setting, it may take a little longer. I would say in a Christian setting, you may have depending on what you feel is important as a leader, you may have a scripture reading, you may have a brief devotional, you may have a prayer time. Whatever you want to do is fine. But I would also encourage you just to cover these 3 things. And if you cover these 3 things and whatever devotional you want, it keeps it to fairly short. Now, what I would also say is that those of you who are in corporations, you have to, I work a lot in for-profit corporations. This is optional. In some for-profit corporations in America where there are a lot of non-Christians, they don't put prayer as a part of their reporting process. But in ministries, they tend to do it. Right. The question is, do you have a follow-up tool for following up on what I need to follow up on as a leader when there's so much going on? The best way I've found personally is to have a notebook like you've got, basically called follow-through. Follow up, follow through. And the only thing you keep in that notebook or in that computer file is a list of things that people have said they were going to do and the dates they said they were going to do them, and check off when they're done. And then you basically look and say, by the way, how are you coming on this? Because you said you were going to do that. In other words, what people have said they're going to do, just write it down. And just have a list that goes on for years, and then just keep following up. When they get them done, you can either erase them as a computer file, or you can put them over under milestones somewhere if you want to, but you get them off the list. And so the list keeps going like this. And when it gets this way, you go back and say, are you still going to do that? I've decided not to do that. You need to tell the team that you're not going to do that. Whatever. You can do it however fits your mind the best. You can do it by person, or you can do it by the whole. But the easiest way is just to keep a total running log what people have committed to do and what they've done, just strike it out, and then that lets you see what's left to do. Yeah, the question is, could there be a problem that does concern the whole staff? The answer is yes. At which point, I would probably schedule a subsequent time to set aside. I think it's going to take us probably as a group an hour to discuss that. We're trying to get done here by 11. Let's set aside, can everyone make an hour on Thursday morning from 9 to 10 to discuss this? And that'll give us a couple days to think about it, get your thoughts together, get your questions together, and let's meet then and discuss it. That's the way I would probably handle it. The point made was that meetings differ. Some are daily meetings. They should be 5 or 10 minutes, not more. Some that are weekly meetings might be an hour or two. Some that are quarterly meetings might be a whole day. Yeah. Any other quick questions on tracking? The bottom line, I would say on tracking, as I was thinking about it, if I had to give you an icon for tracking, it would be those 6 questions, but it would be 1 page. In other words, don't let your reports be more than 1 page. Okay? It's like, how do I get all that I need to know from my staff on a single page? And that's what I would encourage you to focus on. And how could I get the answer to those 6 questions on 1 single page? And train my staff. I've seen staff actually report on 5 or 6 pages a week. And I say, no. Get on where they can force them to think in terms of 1 page. Then in terms of overall evaluation, let me give you a few thoughts on that. One thing I would encourage you to do is to do away with annual staff evaluation. Stop annual staff evaluations. Stop them. Do not do them anymore. Annual staff evaluation. Replace them with annual career path discussions. The annual career path discussions. No one likes evaluating or being evaluated, actually. No one here likes to be evaluated, and no one likes evaluating. And the past and the focus typically of evaluations is the past and what I did wrong. And it's 90% the past and what I did wrong, and 10% on the future and what does my future look like. And I say what you're trying to make sure once a year is that there is alignment between where that person is and where they want to go, and where the organization is and where you want the organization to go. That's your icon for overall annual career path discussion. What you're trying to do is move from focusing on the past and what they did wrong to focus on the future and where you'd like to see them and where they would like to grow. Now, let me give you a little hint. If I ask you, where would you like to grow personally in the next year? In the next 12 months, where do you want to grow personally? You know what you'll tell me? You'll tell me exactly the list of where, if you've been working with me for 2 years, I think your weaknesses are. In other words, you know what your weaknesses are. You know what you'd like to strengthen. You know where you want to grow. But if I say to you, you're weak in this area, you need to grow in this area, it's totally different than if I ask you, where would you like to grow next year? Totally different. If I spend our annual staff evaluation looking at what you've done wrong, a lot of people will spend the next 2 months worrying about what did I do wrong, and the only thing they hear in that hour is not what their strength is or what they're going to do or where they're going to grow. All they hear and all they remember is what I did wrong. So, if you can move it to the future and say, what I'd like to do is sit down once a year and make sure we're on the same track, make sure there's alignment between who you are and where we are. What do you feel have been your major milestones this year? Where would you like to grow next year? Do you see yourself here long term? How long do you see yourself here? What position would you like to have here someday? How can I help you get ready for it? Those kind of things. What you're going to find is at the end of that discussion, the person feels, I've got strength, I've made progress, I know where I'm going, I'm wanted here, I've got a place here, I know where I'm going, I know I'm getting ready for, I know where I'm growing. There's a sense of a future optimism that comes out of that meeting and a sense of direction. But what comes out of the typical staff evaluation is a sense of I'm a failure, I didn't do it right, I'm not even sure if they really want to fire me and just don't know how. I just feel like I worked hard, but it just doesn't feel like I did much right this year. And I'm saying, which would you rather have? An annual staff evaluation of you or an annual career path discussion about your future and your strengths? Now, you may think, well, you're the only person that I've ever heard say this, and I don't think anyone else would think it. Let me tell you a quick story. You may not have many Chick-fil-A restaurants in Europe yet. I don't know how many there are in Europe, but are you familiar with the idea of Chick-fil-A? Well, Chick-fil-A was started by a man named Truett Cathy. And Truett is now about 80-something, but I was at Chick-fil-A headquarters consulting with their human resources and marketing team. And Truett had, they were at that time about $1 billion in sales at that time. And they had a guest in who was a president of a company that did about $13 billion. And that morning I was with the HR team, the human resources team, and I was explaining this concept. And I was saying, I would encourage you to move away from staff evaluation to annual career path discussion. And the HR director looked at me like, I don't think so. Why do you think that? Are you some kind of expert in human relations? Or is like, that's my area of expertise. What are you doing trying to tell me what, it's like, you just got a feeling he crossed not only his arms, but his legs too, kind of thing. And so Truett needed to show some strength, some executive team strength to this $13 billion guest they had in. So he invited the executive team into the boardroom. And so we all had lunch together with Truett and this $13 billion president. And we all had Chick-fil-A lunches around the board table. And to get things started, Truett said, you're a large company, you're much larger than us. What would you care to share with us in terms of progress you've been making, new insights you've got into how to be an effective organization, etc. The first thing he said was, well, one of the things we have discovered is that we have done away with annual staff evaluation. I looked at the HR director. We didn't need to talk about it from there on. But I'm saying to you, ask yourself the question, do I like evaluating? Do I like being evaluated? Or would I rather have the focus be on what I've done right and how do we move into the future? Now, that's not the time to release someone. The time to release someone is during the year when you conclude they're a 0 to 5 and won't ever be any more and they don't fit somewhere else. But with the 8s, 9s, and 10s, you sit down with an annual career path discussion. That's what I would say about overall evaluation. Now, one other thing I would say,
I'm sorry, is it only applies to age 9 to 10? 8, 9 to 10?
the question is, does it only apply to 8, 9s, and 10s? No, it applies to everyone that reports to you. You have your annual career path discussion. And if you haven't discussed it during the year, this would be a good time to say to the person, I care far too much about you not to be honest with you. In fairness to you, your future isn't here. This is your strength, this is your stress, but you know, it's time to move on. Another thing I would suggest to you is that you help every person on your team, including yourself, find a mentor, a life mentor. Now, for those of you who have been in my other sessions, you know I'm sort of obsessed with the phrase, at this phase of your life, at this phase of your organization's development. What I would say to you is that each of you are old enough to be mentors. You're all old enough and experienced enough and wise enough and gifted enough to be mentors. But this may not be the phase of your life when you've got the extra time to invest in mentoring. You may be so busy that it's just not a good time to be mentoring. At least more than one person. But I'm saying I've had times in my life when even taking on one person as a protege would be too much at that moment. Now there may be other phases of your life when that's primarily what you do. You identify the 10 leaders that you've known and believed in the most, that you think are young and would listen to your leadership and experience, and you may call them, email them, mentor them at a distance and personally, and when they come to see you and when you go to see them. That may be what you, when you've stopped your day-to-day work, that may be 90% of what you do even. But I'm not talking about being a mentor right now. I'm talking about having a mentor right now. And I'm saying all of you, each of us, need a mentor if we can possibly find one now. Let me show you how you find a mentor. Well, first of all, let me define what mentoring is. Ideally, and this is in my book, Mentoring, that I wrote in 1990, and some of you probably bought it off the table downstairs. Ideally, and not all mentoring relationships are ideal. Ideally, mentoring is a lifelong relationship. Ideally, mentoring is a lifelong relationship in which the mentor helps the protege realize her or his God-given potential. There's ideally, mentoring is a lifelong relationship in which the mentor helps the protege realize her or his God-given potential. Like I've told you, not all mentoring relationships are ideal, meaning they're not all lifelong. There's not lifelong input. An example would be, in our time together here, as I've mentioned in other sessions, we may never meet again on this earth. But during this time, I've done my best to help you realize your God-given potential. Even though we may not meet for tea the rest of our lives, I've tried to be your mentor this week, to help you realize your God-given potential. I've also said, sign up for the free Quick Wisdom, which lets me continue to teach you over years through the internet. And if you haven't, sign up quickwisdom.com, and 2 or 3 times a week I will send a question or a principle or something like that, because I want to help you keep growing into your God-given potential over a lifetime, even though we may not meet personally. A couple of additional thoughts. Whenever you meet with your protege, you ask them 2 questions. What are your plans and how can I help? Your whole mentoring relationship is based on 2 questions. What are your plans and how can I help? And what you're doing, the key word in the mentoring relationship is not age. It isn't how old are you, and you aren't 70 years old yet, so you can't be a mentor. No, the key word in mentoring is not age, it's experience. If I were 68 years old, trying to learn ice hockey, I could probably be mentored by a 7-year-old from any one of your countries, because I know nothing about ice hockey. But the 7-year-old would have more experience, so could teach me and could mentor me in how to play ice hockey. So what happens is that when I meet with you as a protege, I say, what are your plans? And how can any of the experience I've had in my past help you get where you're going? That's the mentoring relationship. Now, what I would say is, what you want to do is make a list of the 2 or 3 people that you know that have more experience in the area that you're interested in than you have. They've been doing it longer, they've been doing it better, they've been doing it more successfully, they've been doing it differently, but they've got more experience than you have in the area that you're working in. 2 or 3 people, make a list of 2 or 3 people. Then get together, ask to get together with them for a cup of tea. And just see what your natural chemistry, your natural relationship is. Because with some people, 1 cup of tea, that's all I want to spend with them, ever. Other people, it's like if I have 1 cup of tea, I'd like to have 1,000 cup of teas. If there's a natural chemistry, a natural relationship both ways, then ask for another cup of tea and another cup of tea, and on the 3rd cup of tea, say, may I ask you a question? I sense that when we get together, I really enjoy getting together with you. I learn from you. You're much more experienced than I am. But would you consider, and listen to this next phrase very, very carefully, would you consider being one of my life mentors? Don't say, would you consider being my life mentor? My life mentor seems way too heavy. It's the only one. But to be one of them seems a lot easier. And they may say, what do you mean by that? Because a lot of people that you would go to try to get to mentor you may have a very different definition of mentoring than you have. They may think you're talking about having tea every morning for the next 23 years. Then is when you hand them a copy of the book and say, if you read this, then it would give us the same thing. Or if you simply say, what I mean by that is, could we get together as it's convenient, once a month, once a quarter, once a year, for a cup of tea, for lunch, for dinner, for whatever. And whenever we get together, I will come with a list of questions saying, if you were me, how would you deal with these? And then you bring all of your experience and simply tell me how you would deal with this if you were me. How often do you meet with the mentor, your proteges or your mentors? And there is no answer to the question. In other words, you meet whatever makes sense. For example, if your protege gets into real trouble, you may meet once a week for a while. If they're going through marriage problems, you may meet once a week for a while. If you get busy, you may meet once a month for a while. If they get busy and you get busy, you may meet once a quarter for a while. And if marriage gets into trouble, you may meet once a week again. There is no fixed time. It's whenever it's important to get together. So I would say, ideally, I would at least text or email and say, how are things going? Let me give you a question that is one of the best questions I've ever been asked. I've collected questions I've got a collection of probably thousands of questions, but this is one of probably the top 5 questions I've ever been asked. I was on a parking lot getting into my car, and a man, Dr. Ralph Hamburger, who was one of the pastors of the church I was attending, was getting into a car probably 10 cars away. And he saw me and he said, "Bob, how goes the battle?" I said, "It's great." He said, "Well, hang in there, keep after it." And he got in his car and took off. But do you see the beauty of the question, how goes the battle? If I'd have said, "Well, not so well," he'd have been across that parking lot that fast and said, "What's wrong?" If I'd have said, "This is the best day of my life," he just gets in his car and says, "Well, great, I don't have to worry about him today." You see the difference? So every once in a while, text your protege, email your protege. A lot of times, actually, I just email my protege and say, "John, Bob, Tom, how goes the battle, Bob?" When they write back and say, "Going great," I just don't even think about them for another month or two. When they say, "Well, it's been pretty heavy, it's been da-da-da-da-da," then I think, well, should I email them or should I call them? Or if it's real serious, should I go see them or should I, you know what to do. But I'm saying, just the simple question, how goes the battle, can let you know what's appropriate. The question is, if I'm 4 hours away from a person that I would like to be my mentor, how do I get them interested in me? How do I help them see the value of that?
I can even go, but how do I make them my mentor?
How do I get them interested in mentoring me?
Yes.
And that's where I say the tea comes in. You get together for a cup of tea or coffee or lunch or whatever, and you just talk about what you're doing. And if they say, "What you're doing is so small, I don't even want to talk about it," that's one thing. If they say, "Really, that's amazing, what you're doing is," and if they get real excited about what you're doing and say, "Hey, and here's how you could help, and here's what I found," and if they get excited about what you're doing, then you get together again. And if they stay excited, and the third time they're still excited, then you ask, "Would you consider being one of my life mentors?" And it may take you driving a couple 100 miles to have tea that second time or third time. It may take you a year. You have tea once, you have tea 6 months later at a district conference or something, and then maybe you drive to see them. But however it works out, the essence is get with them personally to see if there's a natural chemistry, see if they're excited about what you're doing, if you feel like their heart is to help you, just like your heart is to help young leaders. When you see young leaders that have potential, you want to help them, just so people like me see leaders like you and want to help you. And so the two people you put down there, probably if they got to know you, would want to help you. But they can't know you unless they get some time with you. That's where the T comes in. The question is, should I ask a mentor to be my mentor? And I say, not the first two visits. Because on the second visit, you may decide, I really don't like this person's advice, or their wisdom isn't helpful, or something. But if the third time you meet, you feel like every time I meet with this person, I learn, I grow. Our natural chemistry is there. Then I would ask the question, would you consider being one of my life mentors? Now, theoretically, the mentor should say, would you consider having me be one of your life mentors? Theoretically, the mentor should initiate to the protege. But the reality is, most of the people in my generation do not feel confident as mentors. And so they see young people they'd like to mentor, but they don't know how to approach the subject, so they just remain silent. So therefore, even though it's ideal that I would come and offer to give you time, if I don't come and offer, then you come and ask. What qualities should I look for in a mentor? I would say, first of all, experience. I'd say godly character, and because Scripture is clear, seek not the counsel of the ungodly. So I'd say a godly character, and then experience that I look up to. They've got more experience in an area I need to grow in. Those would be the two main things I would look for quickly. Yes. Is there a rule that says my mentor cannot be within the organization, basically? Ideally, your mentor is outside the organization, because often people get confused by, if I have 3 staff people and I'm mentoring one of them but not the other two tend to get jealous. But there may not be a natural chemistry with the other two, etc. So ideally, your mentor and your proteges will be outside the organization. But the good news is this: you can tell every person on your staff, encourage them to go find a mentor outside the organization. And my point is, it will strengthen every staff member you have by having a mentor that you don't have to pay for. 2 more questions, then I'd like to move on. The question is, should you look for personal counseling from your mentor, or do you look for other issues? It depends on, if your mentor's expertise is in organizational development and you're having marriage problems, you may need to look to a marriage counselor or a wise person, a couple in marriage. It may not be your mentor. But once you develop a confidence that this person is wise in life, I might go ahead and ask them, how have you and your wife handled this? Or have you ever experienced this? Or do you have any advice for me? Once you develop a relationship of trust with a mentor, you can ask them almost anything, and they will either tell you, that's not my area of expertise, but I know someone that can help you with that, would be the most common response. Do I see any difference between mentoring and spiritual direction? There's a huge difference between mentoring and discipleship. Discipleship, you come and say, as a new Christian, there are 10 areas you need to master: prayer, Bible study, etc. There's a specific curriculum, a discipleship curriculum you're taking them through. Whereas with a protege, you don't come superimposing an agenda, you come saying, what are your plans and how can I help? And if they say, what are your plans, and say, I'd like to grow spiritually, you'd say, then there are 10 things that could help you, the 10 steps to spiritual maturity or whatever. You can respond, but you're not superimposing. Those are quite different. Now, some disciplers have a mentor's approach to discipling, but many do not. And the other thing is this: discipleship does not require a relationship. It doesn't require it. You can disciple someone through the 10 steps to maturity that you would not want to be a personal friend of. But you know they need it, you take them through it, you say, God bless you, you're on your own. Whereas mentoring requires a relationship by definition. They're different. They're to me, you've got evangelism, discipleship, mentoring, coaching are very different categories. They're like apples, oranges, bananas, and peaches. They're very, very different. They can have overlap, but they're very different concepts. I said there are 2 more questions, but we're going to let 3 happen.
No, good.
The question is,
How
can
many
you
mentors
have
can I have?
more than one mentor?
To make sense.
You probably know the name Bill Hybels, the Willow Creek Church. He was on the Focus on the Family board with me for 3 years. And we were having a discussion going on a bus somewhere to see some property or something. And I said, Bill, how many mentors do you have? And he said, you mean in the past or now? I said, well, let's start now. And he said, no, let's see. Probably 14. I said, Bill, explain that to me. He said, well, what I find is some people are very good in organizational finance, but they're not good in personal finance. And some people are good in finance, but not in marriage. And some people are good in marriage, but not in how to build a church. And so he said, depending on the subject, I have different experts that I go to help me in the various areas. And I say, you can have 3 or 4 or 5, you could have 14 mentors, but what you're looking for is someone that you have a good relationship with, that wants to see you win. And again, let me give you the definition one more time. Ideally, mentoring is a lifelong relationship in which the mentor helps the protege realize her or his God-given potential. One word of warning. I was talking to Bill Bright about this, and I'd done the book, and we were doing a booklet, and I wanted to distribute it widely in Campus Crusade about mentoring. And I had Bill read the booklet. I said, Bill, would you do me a personal favor? I asked him 2 personal favors my entire lifetime. I asked him for a personal favor. I said, would you read this and see if you have any concerns about it, because I want to distribute it to the staff, and I don't want anything distributed to the staff that you wouldn't be pleased with. And he read it, and the only change he made was I said something like, mentoring someone of the opposite gender can be dangerous or something like that. He said, I would recommend that you not mentor someone of the opposite gender. And the reason is because a lot of times the relationship develops, and that mentoring relationship develops so that it's so close that it gets confusing with sexual relationship. I mean, it gets physical. And so I would encourage men not to mentor women and women not to mentor men. And that was Bill's only caution. Now, I'd like to come back to say with overall evaluation, if I could put an icon on it, it would be making sure that there's clear alignment between what your staff members' dream is and where they're headed and where your organization is headed. That's what you're really trying to put together in that annual career path discussion. Now, I'd like to look at refinement for just a minute. The key to refinement is actually process. Process is something that looks like this. It's like this, step 1, step 2, step 3, that leads to these 2 steps, which leads to this, which leads to these 3 steps, which leads to this step and then this step. And there is a sequence and an order to this flow of information or process some way. And then at the end, there's feedback that comes back to the beginning, which says how to improve it. This is a picture of what I would call process. It could be called a flow chart. It could be called a process chart. A couple things about process. Number one, it is the absolute key to transferability. That is extraordinarily important for you to see. It is the key to transferability. In other words, if you're going to transfer, let's say you're going to leave your current position and go to another company, and you're wanting to make sure that whoever takes over follows through properly, and you just say, oh, don't forget this, and oh, don't forget that, and hey, you need to do this too on your way out the door. You keep saying, oh, and don't forget this, and don't forget this. That's one thing. On the other hand, if you can say, I'm leaving, but let me show you the essence of what you need to keep track of and what the job is. The first thing you need to understand is here. Do you understand that? Yes. Do you understand this? Do you understand? Here is the big picture of what you do. Transferability happens very fast. In the Love Loaf program that I developed for World Vision, we had a 42-step process laid out. I put together a notebook with 42 tabs in it, 1 tab for each of these steps. When I left World Vision, it was already raised over $1 million. Now it's raised over $100 million. When the lady came in to take over, when I left to start consulting, she had worked at World Vision, but we had never discussed the Love Loaf. I had met her, but she had never been in my office before. She came in, I said, her name was Patricia, Pat. I said, Pat, first of all, let me give you a big picture overview of the Love Loaf. And I took her through the 42 steps. The first thing we do is this, and then we do that, and then it gets here, and these 3 things happen at once, and then we go to here, and then finally here, and then we... In the 42 steps, do you have any question about the big picture? No, I think I've got it. Now, I said, and by the way, I want to tape it, so I turned on the tape. And I took her through that. And then I said, now I'd like to go through it in detail. Now that the big picture is clear, I want to go through it in detail. I said, turn to anything you have question about step 1, you just turn to tab 1 in your notebook. And all of the forms we use, a sample of what we've done, a sample of what we use, pictures of it or whatever, are all under tab 1 in your notebook. Just turn to your notebook, you got it. And then I said, now, do you have any questions about number 1? Nope. How about tab 2? I went through it, showed it to her, recorded it. We went through all 42 steps. It took us 2.5 hours to transfer a multi-million-dollar program. And I said, now look, Pat, this has been my idea. It's been my baby. I've developed it. I gave it birth. I came up with the whole concept. And it's like, this is my baby. I don't want it to fall in the ditch. I'm leaving World Vision, but here's my personal home number, Call me day or night if you have any problems at all, because I want this to succeed and reach its full potential. Any other questions? No, I think I've got it. The first call I got after 2.5 hours of transferring a multi-million-dollar program was 4 years later. That's transferability, okay? The first call I got was 4 years later. Mr. Biehl, yes? This is so-and-so at World Vision. Is it true that you came up with a level of program? Yes. Well, what happens when this happens? I say, well, first of all, get out the process chart. What process chart? Well, okay, get out the manual. What manual? He was the third or fourth person that had it, but somewhere along the line, whoever had it took it with them, and therefore there was no transferability. He had to start over, basically. But I'm saying any time that you can have your staff member document, for example, putting on the forum. What is the first thing we do to put on the forum? The second thing? What's the process for the forum so that when the next person comes in, it's much easier transferability. Now, it's also the key to refinement. You basically look and say, is step one red, yellow, or green? Green means it's operating just like it should. Yellow, it's got a few problems, and red is it's in real trouble. Green, 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 red. You'll rarely have any greens beyond the first red. So if you're trying to improve or refine any part of your system, doesn't it make sense that when you've got the process chart, you keep trying to drive the green this way until it's all green? You keep trying to refine, 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 and refine until you get this, and then you refine that, and when that turns green, a lot of this will turn yellow or green too.
Could you give us an example, like a short of simple process? So I can...
Okay. Let's say, for example, the forum. You may have, the first thing you do is you establish dates for the next year's forum. You get hotel reservations so that we make sure we've got plenty of rooms reserved. You may plan the meals. You may invite the speakers. You may establish what materials they will bring. You may create the notebooks. You may arrange the transportation. You may send a delegation ahead to receive people. You may get the volunteers lined up. You may have the event, and then you may look at the evaluations that came in from the event and say, from the evaluations, what do we do next year to improve the system? Other questions? That's the key to refinement. And any time you can have your staff document what they're doing so that if they leave, you don't have to retrain someone from scratch. There's a process in place. It's better. Now, let me stop here to say quickly, to say, there are some people that are process-oriented. This just comes natural. It's like, this is the way I think. This is the way I think. The first time someone explained this to me, I thought, this is the way I think about everything. It all looks like this to me. Other people, it never looks like this.
Especially vision.
It depends. But some people are process-based, but not process-oriented. In other words, some people, whatever you give them, if you give them just a bunch of blocks they'll arrange them this way. The first thing they do is rearrange the pieces in the right order. Other people never know how to put the order together. It just doesn't, that's not the way their mind works. But if you'll show it to them, they can work from that for the next 20 years. So you may not be process oriented. You may find it difficult to put pieces together in sequence. Your mind may not work that way. But you may have one of your 5 people on your staff that just everything you give them, they just organize it that way. Then take advantage of that to help have that one person help everyone on your staff organize their responsibilities that way. So refinement, the icon for it is a process chart like this. If you will make sure your team has a clear annual plan, make sure you get the right team together, you get rid of the reds and yellows one way or the other, and you get an all-green team. If you'll define your rocket, if you'll build a list, and use, by the way, use the rocket to help you grow the list. In other words, they may come in because of the rocket. They may join your list. They may sign up to get information from you because of the rocket. But then when you explain other programs, they may be very excited about them. If in tracking, you'll get it to one piece of paper using those 6 questions, and then overall evaluation, if you'll do away with staff evaluation, but make sure that everyone once a year are thinking longer term, know where they are happy where they are, etc. And then if you'll start refining the process, and by the way, there is a sequence here. When you start an organization, don't start here, start here. You start here, and then go here, and then go here. If you take over an organization, you say, do we have clear direction? Yes. Have we got the right team? Yes. Have we got the right money? Yes. Have we got tracking? No. Start there. Until these 6 steps are in place, you're gonna struggle building an organization. But once these 6 are in place, there'll be other things that you'll have to deal with, but those 6 give you about a high percentage of it. Now, let me wrap up with a few thoughts for you, and then I want to just open it up for questions for the rest of the time we have together. I'd say, in summary, one of the things that I would encourage you to absolutely keep you and your team focused on, that in fact God is. If God exists, your entire life is different than if He doesn't. Whether people encourage you, attack you, discourage you, talk badly about you, if God exists, what does that matter? If He doesn't exist, it matters a lot. I'll cry all night. If He exists, and I'm doing what I feel He wants me to do, why do I care if they're calling me bad names because I'm a Christian? And there was a sign on my grandmother's wall that said this: you have but one life, 'twill soon be past, and only what's done for Christ will last. One life, 'twill soon be past, and only what's done for Christ will last. That is absolutely true. At 68 years old, you've only got one life, and it will soon be past. I remember when I was young like you, and it seems like yesterday. The older you go, the faster time goes. When you're 9 years old, it seems like every day is like 10 years. But today, it seems like every day is about 20 minutes to you, or 30 minutes. It seems like the days go by. Can you realize that we've been here 5 or 6 days already? I say that time just flew past. And I'm saying before you know it, you'll be 10 years older. One life, 'twill soon be past, And what you're going to find at the end of it, it's only what's done for Christ will last. Don't ever forget that. Number two, Scripture is clear, Jesus is clear that he who would be the greatest of all would be the servant of all. Your job as a leader is not to make your staff behave and mind and do what you say. Your job is to serve them. Ask yourself this question. Of all the people that know you, how many people think you are just wonderful? They just think you, in my family we call it hung the moon. They think you can do no wrong. How many people like that in your life? How much have you been serving them? Now, how many people think you can do no right? They think you're a jerk. They think you're dumb. They think you're no good. How much have you been serving them? I'm saying he who would be the greatest of all would be the servant of all. That's very clear. Ask yourself, how can I serve my team? How can I help them get where they're going? How can I help them define a clear path and help them grow into that potential? How can I help them find a mentor? How can I be an encourager to them? If not on my team, how can I help them find a place some other place? By the way, that reminds me, when it's time for a person to leave your staff, a warning, don't say, look, you can stay here until you find a place. But when you find a place, I think it'd be wise for you to go ahead and take something else. Do not say that. They may be there 15 years later trying to find a place that's as comfortable to them as your place is. Set very specific time deadlines to say, actually, I'd like to give you time to find a new place. Let's say 30 days or 60 days or 90 days or something like that will be your last day. Now, depending on how, I'm getting off on a sidetrack, but it just reminded me of something. Depending on how important it is, if they particularly have a negative attitude toward you and your ministry in any way, or are undermining or divisive, it may pay you to say, I'd like this to be your last day, but I'd like to pay you for 30 days while you're looking for another position, or pay you for 60 days, or pay you for 90 days because you've been so faithful as a worker here over the years. But if a person, you don't want to give them 30 days to just disrupt everything and tell, and to divide and try to polarize the team against you and tell you all that. So if they're positive and trying to help and wanting to make a difference and all, go ahead and let them work for a while if you want to. But if you sense them being there after they're no longer here is going to be disruptive, I'd go ahead and pay them, but position it with them that I'm going to release you today to start looking for where your strength can fit, but I will pay you while you're working up to 90 days or up to 30 days or up to however often, how much ever you have. The third thought I'd like to give you is I'd like to help you define significance and understand the word significance. Because your work is very significant. Now, you may say, well, it's very important to me to make a significant difference, but isn't it important to everyone? Well, no. To some people, on a scale of 1 to 10, significance is a 2 or 3. In others, it's a 10. How, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it to you to make a significant difference? It's my guess most of you it'd be very significant, very important. Be an 8, 9, or 10. You may find some pagans, matter of fact, you would find pagans within 10 miles of where you live, that significance, making a significant difference, is a 10. The only problem is there is no chance on earth that they can make a significant difference. Because making a significant difference is making a difference that lasts over time. If you make a difference that'll last a day, it feels sort of insignificant, because if I rearrange the chairs today and they rearrange them tomorrow again, it doesn't feel very significant. But if you build a building like this, it'll be here 100, 200 years from now, you think, well, I did a pretty significant thing. We built this building. But if it'll only be here 50 years or 100 years, it's only relatively significant, therefore it's relatively insignificant. The castle up there was 1500, was it? Or something like that? I mean, it's like, it's lasted for centuries, sort of. But it isn't the castle anymore, and at the time it was very significant. Right now, it's simply a tourist attraction. It's relatively insignificant. The one and only way that anyone has the ability to make a truly significant difference in a positive sense, now you can have a young person fall and make an eternally negative significant difference, but the only way you can make a positive significant difference is something that will last for eternity. There's that castle will be just really dust in probably another 500 years. You probably won't even be able to go through it. But the soul of Lazarus is still in eternity, 2,000 years later. When I began to see that the soul of Lazarus was more eternally significant than 25 brand new sparkling Bentleys, isn't that an interesting thought? That the soul of a beggar is more significant than 25 brand new Bentleys. I say the work that you're doing to bring people to Christ and to develop them in Christ and to help them mature in Christ and reach other people for Christ is far more significant than 25 Bentleys. I'm saying don't ever forget that your work, how significant your work really is. Even though it may not be as, quote, successful as you would like it to be. Success is one dimension. Success is simply the feeling you get when you reach your goals or accomplish your priorities. Success is irrelevant, really. That feeling is irrelevant, really. Success is an irrelevant variable, really. Fun is an irrelevant variable, really. Significance is a very relevant variable, really. I'm saying it's important for you to see how significant your work really is, and keep having your staff, as you build this organization, as you build this team, as you build these donors, as you build this staff, as you build this ministry, as you build these unpaid team members as a part of your team, it's very important that you keep helping them see how significant the work is. And lastly, it's very, very important that you not only hear me say it, but believe when I say it, that there are no perfect leaders. There are no perfect leaders. The only perfect leader that ever walked the face of this earth was Jesus. You will make mistakes. You'll misread people. You'll hire people that you have to fire later. You'll start programs that don't work. You will fail. Everyone in this room will fail. I have failed many, many, many times. There's no such thing as a perfect leader. But what you're in the process of doing is using both your successes and your failures to grow toward your potential, to get ready for what God has in mind for you in the future. And you learn as much and sometimes more from your failures than you do your successes. Learn from both sides of it. But don't even try to be the perfect leader. There's no way you can be, there's no way you will be. You may as well not try. But you will be significant. And just do the best you can. But don't beat yourself up too much if you fail. Don't be too hard on yourself if you don't do it right every time. I find people getting so discouraged because they fell short of their own targets, their own goals, their own expectations, and they failed. They wasted money. They put money into something, donor money into something that didn't work. I say not everything is going to work. That's a part of the process of becoming who God has in mind for you to be, is learning lessons that come from failure as well as success. And I've tried to give you tools that would help you know how to develop an organization, to both lead and manage. A lot of this has to do with leadership. A lot of it has to do with management. It is a simple process of clear direction, the right team, and enough money, which is 85% of it. Tracking it, evaluating, refining it, and then coming back and doing the same thing over and over. You've had a lot of tools out on the table. You're taking tools home with you that will hopefully be helpful to you. Remember that you have a lot more tools available, many of which are free at bobbbiehl.com. Many of which are videos you can watch free to answer questions for you. Principles that are free by alphabet on the quick wisdom. If you want to know discouragement or depression or motivation or any of those kind of things, feel free to get that. It's all free. And there are other tools, books, tapes, etc. that you can order there to help you in very specific areas of your life. So don't forget that. Well, we've got a few minutes now for questions on anything we've covered this week, anything we've covered today. And then we'll fill out the evaluations and you're on your way to apply the tools and change the world. And be significant. But what questions do you have on any subject at the moment? Anything that's pressing? Yeah. The question is, in finding a mentor, are you trying to find your type of person? Ideally, yes. Someone who is like you, only more experienced. Or someone who has a personality, something like yours, only more experienced. But it may be a person with quite a different personality, but they've got experience you can learn from. So it doesn't have to be like you, but ideally it would be like you, only a little more experienced. The question is, how do you get comfortable using new tools if you're not comfortable the first time? There are 2 or 3 things I would say. First of all, I was talking to Jim Cece, and he reminded me of something. He said, Bob, what I'm going to do when I leave here, he said, I've got a very, very busy schedule, but he said, I'm going to take 3 days and take all the tools you've taught me and apply them in my own work for the next 3 days, just to make sure I can apply them when it's fresh in my thinking, because they're so helpful. What I would suggest is that every time you schedule a conference to attend, this one or any conference, the rest of your life, when you put it on your calendar, I'm going to attend this conference. In the next week or two, when you get home, probably not the first day or two, because your schedule is so packed with people wanting to see you or making decisions or something like that. But a day or two or three after you get home, schedule a day when you go back through all of the tools you've learned from all the people and say, which 5 or 10 do I want to apply right now? And then you start applying them yourself and get them to work for you. And the best way to actually learn a tool is to teach a tool. So if you want to really learn any one of these tools, start teaching it. Teach it to your proteges. Teach it to your team. Share it with your team. Answer their questions. Go back to your notes. Go through your notes. Tell your team, I'd like to teach you a new tool tomorrow. Go through your notes 2 or 3 times and try to get it to where it's as fresh in your thinking as you can, then teach it to them. And one of the best ways to really learn it is to teach it. Now, let me suggest another thing. A friend of mine, not a friend of mine, a guy that I knew once, actually, now that I remember who he was, taught me this principle. Anything you read 100 times, you've memorized whether you want to or not. Now, whether that's technically accurate, consider the concept of it. Draw yourself a grid that is 100 squares. Hundred squares like that. And then ask yourself, go through all your notes from this week and write down the things that you really want to plant deeply in your memory. Maybe nothing motivates like results. Once the facts are clear, the decisions jump out at you. What the mentoring is ideally a lifelong relationship in which the mentor helps a protege realize her or his God-given potential. Whatever the thoughts you want to memorize and just plant deeply in your memory, make a list of them. Just type them out and carry them with you for a week or 2 or a month, just on a sheet or 2 of paper. The top 50 thoughts from this session. Every time you're sitting in a doctor's office waiting to see the doctor, pull them out and read them again and check it off. Say, I just read it another time. You go and you're waiting to meet someone for lunch. They don't show up. They call and they say they're going to be 10 minutes late. Read it again. You wake up early in the morning, can't go back to sleep. Read it again. Can't go to sleep at night. Read it again. And just keep reading it. Keep carrying it with you. Keep carrying that sheet of 50 thoughts with you. Just carry it with you till you've read it 100 times. And then put that piece of paper in a file somewhere and read it once every year or 2. But you're going to find that once you've read it 30, 40, 50 times, you're going to start quoting it in conversations at lunch. You're going to say, I was at a conference and they said that ideally mentoring is a lifelong relationship in which a mentor helps helps a protege realize her or his God-given potential. You're going to find it just sort of comes naturally to you because you've read it 35 times. One of the best ways to really put something deep into your memory is right there. So, but if you don't schedule the time after a conference like this, you've got a notebook full of notes that are sort of you got 500 things, not 30 things you're trying to remember or something like that. So I'd say schedule the day is the key. Go back through your notes while they're fresh. Make a list of everything you really want to remember. Make your grid. Start through them and then teach them as soon as you can to whoever will listen. The question is, you found this extremely helpful, but is there anything that you've taught as gospel truth, and then as you went along, you found it that wasn't right? The answer is yes. Now, what I would say is that I try never to write anything that I haven't taught several times. Pete Wagner, C. Peter Wagner, who was the head of church growth at Fuller Seminary for a number of years, taught me this. He said, Bob, I never put anything into writing I haven't taught at least 40 times. Because in teaching it, you sort of refine the edges. Most of what I have done has been refined through practice over 35 years. But the one thing, I wrote a book called Stop, the only book I've ever written that I wish I could, in a sense, take back, and I need to revise and haven't done it yet, is the book called Stop Setting Goals. Because I said that you're either goal-oriented or problem-oriented, but I hadn't seen the opportunity-oriented yet. And so I need to revise that. But why you do what you do, master planning, leading with confidence, mentoring, I read it 10 years later and I wouldn't change anything on them. Until I absolutely see it clearly and feel confident that it's right and it fits with everything else I've taught, I tend not to talk about it. That's why I take the summers, July, August, and September, off just to think and make sure it makes sense before I start teaching something. So I try my best not to have to do that, but I've had to do it a few times.